Good morning, friends. Happy Thursday, September 21st. You can see the agenda today. We're talking stocks, bonds, the allocation, risk, and diversification we need in our investments. I would imagine this sounds pretty foreign to you, but by the end of next week, when we start doing investments, this will all make sense. Whatever time you have left, my guess is the video is 10, 15 minutes. Whatever time you have left, you have to begin working on hopefully completing your week 3 checks for your bills, the deposit that you'll make into your checking account for being paid, and then updating your ledger and budget sheet. Your checks will go in the hand-in bin on my desk. Make sure you staple them together on my desk. And then I'll look at the budget sheet this week so I can look at that from home. 10-point assignment here because you'll be getting points for both the week 2 checks and this week's checks, week 3. Let's get into it. So yesterday we talked about paying yourself first, right? Taking half of your income, saving it. Part of that should be invested. We'll get into the particulars of how much you can, or how much you should be investing. And again, this is a great way. Dogs up. This is a great way to make, to save up millions of dollars. And, the nice thing, I want to stress this, the millions of dollars that we are talking about, if we saved 5% or 10%, 5%, you are only saving $156,000. That is your money. You are only putting away $150,000, but you are making $1.3 million in interest. If you're saving 10%, you're saving $312,000 of your money over the course of your career, but you are making $2.6 million or so in interest. So again, we have present money, future money. We have our money now. We need to take that money now so we can earn more money in the future. Yesterday, I told you that we were going to skip over the derivative securities. I do want you to write this down. Make sure you're getting this information down. So if you didn't write it down yesterday, pause the video, get it down, both slide 5 and slide 6. So pause the video, write this down. I'll explain this when I'm back in class on Monday when we kind of review everything, make sure what I was trying to explain in the video makes sense to you. So go ahead, pause, rewind if you need to for the previous slide, but pause, get this down. We'll go through this on Monday. All right, so there's a variety of ways in which you can invest your money, and we'll talk about all the different types of securities that you can buy. They're called securities because they're secure. They're somewhat safe. There is risk. I'll get into that. They're regulated by the United States government. So from over the course of a couple hundred years, some things happened that were disadvantageous, predatory towards the American consumer, you guys. The government has set up laws to regulate them so they are as safe as possibly could be. Right. Some of the things that we're going to be investing in are bonds and stocks. The official term is common stocks because there are a couple of different types of stocks. We'll get through all of those, but we call them stocks. All right. Governments or corporations can issue bonds. Companies can issue stocks. All right. Whether it is a bond or whether it is a stock, these are governments or corporations who are in need of capital. Capital can be anything. Capital can be labor. Capital can be factories. Capital can be land. Capital can be machines. Capital can be technology. Capital could be, in this case, since we're talking about investments, capital is money. Capital is something that the government or corporations will use to their advantage. They will use it in a way to make more money. If a government or a corporation is seeking capital, if they are seeking finances, if they're seeking money, if they're seeking your cash, to be invested in whatever they are doing, they cut you in on the profits. This is how you generate future money from the money that you have now. Perhaps the government wants to build a stadium. Perhaps the government wants to build a school. Perhaps the government wants to build an airport. Perhaps corporations want to launch a new factory. They want to launch a new product. Whatever it is, they need money to do that. So they will issue bonds or they will issue stocks. When they are making money from it, think about this. If a corporation, sorry, if the government is, we'll say Minneapolis or St. Paul, they're building a new hockey rink, if they're building a new football stadium, if they're building a new soccer stadium, that will generate money. People will go to the games, they'll pay taxes on those tickets. People will go to a game, they'll buy a hot dog or a pop or whatever it is. There are taxes that are generated from that. There are sales taxes. That's how they pay back the people who have invested in them. Same thing with the corporations. If Apple is launching a new piece of technology that will generate revenue for them, if you are investing in that company, they will cut you in on their profits. Let's get into bonds. A bond is a loan, right? In simple terms, a bond is a loan. If someone loans you money, the expectation is after a certain amount of time, you get your money back. A bond. If you've ever taken out a loan, perhaps to buy a car, parents have taken out loans to buy cars, to buy houses. Perhaps next year and 2 years, you're going to be taking out loans to go to school. You know that when you borrow money, you pay interest on the money that you borrowed. And then eventually you have to pay the money back. This is exactly how bonds work. Corporations will take out a loan from investors. They pay interest while they have the money. And then after a certain period of time, they have to pay the money back. Bonds are issued in typically $1,000 increments. We call this the par value. Why they call it the par value? I don't make up the rules, but it's called the par value, typically $1,000 increments. The interest that you receive for your money that you've invested into a bond is called the coupon rate. However long the bond is, could be 3 months, could be 6 months, could be 12 months, could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be 30 years. You will receive that interest payment quarterly, semi-annually, annually, monthly. Everything is different. You will receive the interest for that bond established by the corporation. You will continuously get money paid back to you, simply interest. That's the coupon rate. When the bond hits its maturity, again, could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, a year, 10 years, 5 years, 30 years, whatever it is, they pay the money back at the maturity date, whatever the length of the term is, whatever the length of the loan is, or in this case, the bond, they pay the money back. So if we're talking about generating future money with our money we have now, you've got $1,000 and you buy a bond, you will get that $1,000 back at the maturity date. And throughout the length of that bond, you get interest. So your $1,000 is generating interest, and then you get that money back. Stocks are a little bit different. This isn't so much a loan, right? There is no end date. If you buy stock in Target, or you buy stock in Apple, you buy stock in Costco or Walmart, you are generating money in a couple of different ways. You can generate future income through capital gains. And we know that capital gains is the increased value that your stock accumulates. So you buy it at 10, after a couple of years, you buy stock at $10 a share. Over a couple of years, let's say the price rises to $20 a share, you've made $10 in capital gains per share. If you have 100 shares, 10 times 100 is $1,000. While you own that bond, while you own that bond, you can be generating income. If that corporation is making profits, what can typically happen is, we'll go back to this slide again, they'll pay dividends. Dividends aren't guaranteed. A lot of companies pay dividends. We'll get more into companies that continuously and increasingly pay dividends. But again, a dividend is, if we look at the beginning of the word here, a divide. It is your division, your portion of the increased profits that the company is making. So again, this generates income on the money that you've invested. It generates income while you own it. Unlike buying baseball cards or gold coins, those things do not generate income for you while owning it. A bond, again, is a loan to a corporation or to a government. Common stock is specifically for corporations. And because you've invested money into the corporation, you have, as some would say, bought some ownership of the company. So you get to have a voice in the decisions that they make. You get to vote on certain things. There's no question that there is risk to investment. Obviously, some investments are safer than others. Probably the safest thing you can invest in is bonds, whether they be corporate bonds or government bonds, because they are a loan, because you are going to get your money back. They pay a lower interest rate. They pay a lower interest rate because they are not as risky. The chances of you losing money on a bond is relatively low. There are things that affect the value of bonds. All right. Case in point, interest rate. If you bought a government bond at 2% and the interest rates go up, your bond isn't worth as much, right? You bought a bond at 2%, and right now the current interest rate is 7%. You are not making as much money on that bond as you could. But here's the thing about bonds. You only lose money if you sell your bond before the maturity date. If you buy a 10-year bond at 5% interest and you sell it 1 year later, you don't have to. You sell it 1 year later and the interest rate is 7%, you're going to lose some money there, because who's buying a bond at 2% or 5% and the current rate is 7%? That doesn't make any sense. But again, the only way you lose your money is if you sell it before the maturity date. There are risks with business, right? Businesses can go broke, they can go under, they can collapse, they can shut down. But if you're paying attention to, the potentiality of a company, you're only going to invest in companies that you know are going to be around, right? Investing in a brand new company is risky. Investing in a company of blue chip stock like Coca-Cola or General Electric or General Motors, companies that have been around for a very long time and potentially will always be around, risk is limited, right? So you can see here on this chart, what is it called? The risk return relationship. The riskier the investment, the greater the return. Common stocks, there are risks there. The potential return is much higher. We know that 80% of the years that we have money invested will be growth years based on our economy. We know that 20% will be recession years or loss years. It's just how the economy works. It goes up and it goes down. You only lose money if you sell it during a downturn, right? Our investment, since we're looking at investing for future money, we're playing the long game. Studies show that the less amount of times that you are making trades, buying securities, selling securities, the less you do that, the more money that you will make. If you're buying and selling less and only buying or selling at high periods, then the chances are you won't lose any money. The time is always on our side when it comes to investment. The longer you leave your money in, the greater the chance you'll make money. Again, 80% of the time that we have money invested, you'll experience growth. 20% of the time that you're invested, you'll see a recession or a decrease. So the longer you leave it in, the greater the chance you'll be on 80% growth year, you'll make money. Another way to ensure, to minimize your risk is being diversified. not having all of your money in one thing, right? Time minimizes risk, diversification minimizes risk. We should not have all of our money in stocks. You should not have all of your money in government or corporate bonds, and you should not have all of your money in treasury bills. Again, we'll get into all of these things. You should have a variety of each type of security. In regards to stocks, you should not have all of your money invested in one corporation stock. You should not have all of your money invested in one type of industry. You should be in retail. You should be in agriculture. You should be in technology. You should be in manufacturing. You should be involved in both big corporations and small corporations. You shouldn't just be in corporate bonds. You should also be in government bonds. We should invest our money in a variety of different things. Typically, what happens if the stock market isn't doing very well, bonds will do very well. Right now, we have increased interest rates. Money is more expensive. It's costing people 7% to borrow money versus 2% to borrow money. Typically, when that happens, when interest rates are increasing, the stock market will contract a little bit. It'll lose some money. This is typically when people are buying bonds because interest rates are going up. They're locking their money in at 7% versus, potentially locking their money in at 2%. Who wants to invest at 2%? Doesn't make any sense. But if interest rates go up, you're locked in at 7%. You're going to make a lot more money. And again, if we were to go back to bonds here, you know exactly how long your money is going to be in that bond because there's a specified date. You know exactly how much interest you're going to be paid for the life of that bond. So we need to be in both. Being in a variety of different investments minimizes our risk. Leaving our money in for a longer period of time minimizes risks. All right. This particular chart here shows you the potentiality of how much you can make based on how long you're leaving your money in. So stocks, if you leave your money in for 1 year, you could potentially make, 40% on your investment. You could also lose 40% of your investment. This is the impact of a limited amount of time. If you're invested in stocks for 5 years, you can see that your risk of losing money greatly decreases, almost zero. And you can see that your chances of making money are approximately 25%. You can make 25% on your investments. If you're leaving in there for 20 years, you can see that there's virtually zero chance of losing money. And you can make anywhere from, let's call that 5% to 15%. The average rate of return on the stock market is 10%. The longer you leave your money in, your risk of losing money is greatly diminished. The same thing goes with government bonds. The same thing goes with treasury bonds or treasury bills. They're relatively the same thing. The shorter the time period, the greater the variability of how much you can make. The longer you leave it in, narrower variability of how much you can make or lose. And of course, the longer you leave it in, the greater the likelihood that you will be making some sort of profit. But because bonds and because treasury bills, loans, more or less, because you are getting your money back, you will see that your chances of making the most money are relatively limited. There's very little risk there. There's not going to be a high interest rate being paid if there's very little risk for you to lose your money. These are what we would call safe investments. The greater the risk, the greater the chances are of a higher interest rate or a higher income return, the money you get back for your investment. But again, if we have the length of time correct, if we leave it in there long enough, the chances of you losing money greatly diminish. You do have to have an understanding of how much risk you can take on. When we talk about spending half of our money and saving the other half, I'm not telling you you should be investing the other half of your money into investments. That's dangerous. There will be an unexpected expense that you have to pay. Perhaps you need new brakes. Perhaps you need new tires. Perhaps your water heater breaks, or we just bought a new furnace and air conditioner because ours was old. That's $17,000. You will need money for unexpected expenses that pop up. We should only be putting in part of our savings. This is our financial position. You need to have cash. You have to be able to account for an unexpected expense. So we should only be putting in a certain amount of money, a certain percentage. Also, when it comes to investments, you got to have goals, right? How much are we looking to make? Are we looking to make 1.4 million? Are we looking to pay 2.9 million? When it comes to these retirement accounts, typically how they work, general rules to live by, is that if you take out 4% of these accounts each year, 4%, that'll pay you that money for 30 years. That money will last 30 years. $1 million, we'll just say this is $1 million here on the left. $1 million retirement account will pay you probably $48,000 a year for 30 years. So if we're looking at our goals here, it's $40,000 enough for you to live on when you're 70. $40,000 is not very much, right? It's just more than $3,000 a month, and that's before taxes. So perhaps you need 2.9 million, right? This is closer to 3. This will probably pay you somewhere between $80,000 and $90,000 a year for 30 years once you retire. Is $85,000 enough a year for you to live on? So when we're talking about investments here, how much you're putting in, right? What is your current position? Do we have expenses coming up? Do we have a certain amount of cash on hand in our savings accounts in case we need to buy something or fix something? What are our goals? Are we making enough, or do we have enough money saving up right now to give us the life we want later on? And then we have time frame, right? I can retire at 65. So that is 26 years away. I know that I have a decent amount of time left before I retire. I have a decent amount of time before I have to worry about how much money is in here. So I can take on a lot of risk right now because I have 26, let's come back to this one, 26 years before I can retire. 80% of my 26 years are going to be growth years. 20% of my 26 years left working are going to be recessions. You guys are 17, 18. You should be saving. Soon you'll be starting your investments. You're going to have 45, 46, 47 years of work. You guys can take on a lot of risk right now because you have a great amount of time before you're going to need that money. And we know that the longer we leave our money in, the greater the chance that we're going to have a return. I showed you this chart yesterday, and I want to point it out again. Obviously, we can see great periods of economic growth, right? An increased size of an economy. And we can see periods of downturn where the economy has decreased. But from the beginning of the 20th century all the way up to today, we've seen that our economy has constantly grown. And again, this brings us back to that conversation of time. The longer you have to invest your money is greater for you. This will minimize your risk, right? Your risk is reduced from losing money because, one, our economy will always increase over the course of time, and two, you're not going to need these investments until further down the road. That's an advantage for you guys. So we'll talk more about this when I'm back in the classroom on Monday, where we can talk about our financial position. Again, this gets back to our budget sheets. We can talk about goals, right? I can show you different kind of simulations of how much money you may think you need in the future. And then time frame. This is a straightforward concept here. You guys have plenty of time to make a significant amount of money. The rest of the day, hopefully you got those notes down. You're working in your week 3 checks and deposit activities here. So if I remember correctly, last week, week 2, your checkbook should have had $360 left in it. So the first thing you're going to do is make a deposit for $1,100, $1,100. So now your checking account balance should be $360 plus $1,100. So that should be $1,460. Make your deposit first, add it to the balance, $360 plus $1,100. Then you're going to write the checks. Whoopsies. Then you're going to write the checks to these companies. So these will be subtractions. Staple your checks together, put them in the hand and bin, update your ledger. Right? Your new balance this week should start at $1,460. You'll subtract these amounts and get a new balance at the end. Update your budget sheet. Checks get stapled together, put in the hand-in bin on my desk. You update your ledger. You update your budget sheet. This week, I am looking at the budget sheet to make sure that you have been updating those for the last 2 weeks. Whatever time you have left is yours. On my sub notes, Mr. Veith knows that Friday is a hybrid day. So some of you do not need to come in. I would encourage you to double check your grades for this class. Make sure you don't have any missing assignments. I'm going to try to update grades today and tomorrow. Mr. Veith knows that some people will be gone tomorrow. They're marked on the seating chart who has their hybrid form in. With that, enjoy your Thursday and Friday. Have a great rest of the homecoming week. Save smart choices. I'll see you guys on Monday. And as always, go Spartans.